The city buzzed with excitement that night, as limousines lined up outside the grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Hotel. Chandeliers sparkled through the tall glass windows, and cameras flashed outside as photographers captured the elite stepping out in glittering gowns and tailored suits. It was the evening of the annual corporate gala, a place where fortunes were flaunted and power was measured not just in contracts, but in appearances. The event was covered in magazines and whispered about. In drawing rooms, a stage where every CEO brought his wife as a symbol of elegance and taste, a place where alliances were sealed with champagne and reputations were carved under golden. A light inside the mansion, Daniel adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, his eyes sharp, calculating every detail of his appearance. He was a man who had risen from nothing to sit at the top of the corporate ladder, a man who craved perfection in business and in life. His reflection showed confidence, but the way he glanced back at his wife Claire told another story. Claire stood in the doorway wearing a modest cream-colored dress, her hair tied back simply, her eyes carrying that quiet devotion she had always given him since the days when they shared a small rented room and lived off instant noodles. She held her clutch nervously and smiled softly, asking Daniel, "Are you ready for me to join you?" Her voice was gentle, filled with a hope she had carried for years of being by his side through thick and thin. But instead of warmth, Daniel's eyes turned cold as he scanned her from head to toe, his lips curled in disdain. "Claire, not this time," he said, his tone sharp, dismissive. "This party is for high society. You just don't fit the image." She froze, her heart sinking. The words pierced through her like a knife, and though she had prepared herself countless times to hear his criticisms, it never hurt less. She asked in a whisper, "What do you mean, Daniel?" But deep down she already knew. She had felt his growing distance for months, the way he avoided taking her to events, the way he preferred her silence. Whenever colleagues were around, she was no longer the young, vibrant girl he had fallen in love with. She was the wife who worked quietly behind the scenes, ironing his shirts, preparing his notes, rehearsing his speeches, a woman who sacrificed her dreams to build his world. But to him she was invisible, unworthy. He waved his hand, impatiently, not looking at her anymore. "Just stay home, Claire. You won't understand these people. You'll embarrass me." The words burned her soul more than she could bear. He adjusted his cufflinks, checked his watch, and walked past her without a second glance. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the mansion, leaving Claire standing alone in silence. For a long moment she could not move. Her chest felt heavy, her throat tight, tears brimmed in her eyes, threatening to fall, but she swallowed them down, forcing herself not to cry, because crying would make her feel weaker than he already made her believe she was. Instead, she sat down on the velvet chair in front of her dressing table, staring at her reflection in the mirror. For the first time in years, she really looked at herself, not the woman Daniel wanted her to be, but the woman she used to be once she had been full of life. The girl who loved painting in bold colors, the one who danced barefoot in the rain with red lips, laughing at the wind. She had been the dreamer who believed beauty was not defined by flawless features, but by fire in the eyes and passion in the heart. But that woman was gone, buried beneath years of neglect, buried beneath the subtle, cruel remarks Daniel often made about her appearance. The woman who once dared to wear bright colors now hid in pale shades. The woman who once spoke her mind now silenced herself, because he said it was better for her to let him talk. Claire touched the mirror, tracing the outline of her own face with trembling fingers, and whispered softly, "No more tonight." Something shifted in her heart. It was not anger, but a deep awakening, a realization that she had allowed herself to disappear, but not anymore. She stood up, her legs shaky, but her resolve strong. She walked to her wardrobe, opening the doors and pushing past the rows of conservative dresses Daniel approved for her. She reached deep inside and pulled out a gown she had bought years ago, one she had hidden because Daniel once called it too bold, too much. It was a black silk gown that shimmered in the dim light, hugging her frame in a way that spoke of quiet power. She slipped into it, her breath catching as she looked in the mirror, and for the first time she felt alive. She opened a drawer and found the red lipstick she had stopped using after Daniel mocked it. She held it in her hand, her heart racing before slowly painting her lips red, each stroke reclaiming a part of herself she had buried. Her hair she let loose, cascading down her shoulders. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she moved across the room. Every sound echoing like a heartbeat. She was not just dressing for a party. She was stepping back into herself, becoming the woman she had forgotten. Claire picked up her clutch, her hands steady. Her reflection dazzling, not because of the gown, not because of the lipstick, but because her eyes finally burned with fire again. She whispered to herself, "Tonight, I will not be invisible." Meanwhile, at the gala, Daniel stood among the wealthiest men and women, boasting about his latest project, champagne glass in hand, his laughter loud, rehearsed, every word carefully calculated to impress the investors. He barely noticed the hollow emptiness inside him because he believed appearances were everything as he laughed and shook hands. The grand doors of the ballroom opened, the sound of heels clicking echoed across the marble floor, the music dipped, the chatter quieted, heads turned, eyes widened, whispers spread like wildfire across the room. "Who is she?" they murmured. Cameras flashed as she entered. The air seemed to shift. Every woman in sequined gowns, every man in tailored suits turned to look at her, and in that moment, Claire walked in, not timid, not hesitant, but radiant. She moved with grace, each step confident, her black silk gown flowing like liquid night, her red lips curving into the smallest smile, her eyes burning with the strength she had reclaimed. She was breathtaking, magnetic, unforgettable. Daniel froze his smile, vanishing, his champagne glass slipping slightly in his hand. His heart thudded painfully as realization struck that the woman commanding the entire room was none other than Claire, his wife, the one he left behind, the one he dismissed as unworthy and plain. Though she did not look at him, she did not need to. She walked past him as though he were just another man in the crowd, and in that moment, his world cracked. The investors who were listening to him now turned their attention to her, some whispering she must be someone important, others asking, "Who is she?" And Daniel, for the first time in his career, felt powerless, invisible, replaced by the very woman he had tried to hide. Claire's presence filled the ballroom like music, like light, not because of her gown or her makeup, but because she had rediscovered herself. She was not there for him, not for revenge, but for her. She had decided that tonight the world would see her for who she really was, strong, graceful, unforgettable, and Daniel was left choking on his pride, drowning in regret as he realized he had thrown away a diamond because he was too blind to recognize its shine. As Claire moved deeper into the gala hall, the music picked up again, but the energy in the room was no longer the same. People leaned toward one another, whispering about her beauty, her elegance, her confidence. Investors who had earlier been captivated by Daniel's polished words now turned their eyes away from him, drawn toward the woman whose aura seemed to silence the very chandeliers with their sparkle. Daniel stood frozen, torn between rage and disbelief, because for years he had convinced himself Claire was ordinary, plain, unfit to stand by his side, and now the entire hall seemed to orbit around her presence. He tried to laugh it off, making small talk with a partner, but his voice cracked, his words stumbled as his gaze followed Claire across the room. She did not once look back at him, and that wounded him more than her transformation. She was his wife, but tonight she was untouchable. She floated among the guests, graceful, poised, shaking hands with people who asked her name, as though she were some dignitary. She smiled, answered softly, her voice carrying that warmth Daniel once adored when he was a broke dreamer. Remembered nights when she stayed awake, editing his slides, practicing his speeches. He remembered how she sold her mother's bracelet to help him pay the rent when investors mocked him. She was the one who reminded him of his worth, and yet here, he was ashamed of her presence only hours ago, and now that same woman was the one everyone wanted to meet. Claire allowed herself to enjoy it, not for vanity, but for freedom. She was free from the chains of his constant criticism, free from the years of being told to tone it down, to keep her head low, to not stand out tonight. She stood out unapologetically. A man from the media approached her. "May I take a photo of you, ma'am? You look incredible." She nodded gracefully, and the cameras clicked, flashes exploding in every corner. Daniel's jaw tightened, fury burning in his chest, because he knew tomorrow the headlines would not just mention his company, they would feature Claire, his wife, the woman he tried to hide, as the star of the evening. He pushed through the crowd, his hand brushing her arm. "Claire," he said through clenched teeth, pretending to smile for the cameras, "can I have a word with you?" She turned to him finally, her eyes steady, unreadable. She said lightly, "Of course, Mr. CEO, but not now. I am speaking with people who value my presence more than you ever did." Her words were quiet, but sharp enough to pierce his heart. He forced a smile while whispers erupted around them. Investors glanced at one another. Sensing the tension, Claire excused herself from the photographer and walked away, her gown trailing behind her, leaving Daniel to stew in humiliation. He followed her to the edge of the ballroom, desperate. "Claire, listen to me. You look amazing tonight. I just didn't want you to feel uncomfortable among these people." She stopped, turned to him with fire in her eyes. "Uncomfortable? You mean you did not want to feel uncomfortable having me beside you because I was not a decoration fancy enough to hang on your arm?" "Oh." He swallowed hard, the truth of her words weighing heavy. She continued, her voice steady, "For years I stood by you. Daniel, when you had nothing, I believed in you when nobody else did. I gave up my dreams, my identity, my joy to be the silent shadow supporting you, and now when you are at the top, you think I embarrass you. Well, let me tell you something, I did not come here tonight for you. I came for me because I refused to hide anymore." Her words left him. Breathless guilt stormed inside him, but pride clamped his throat. He wanted to say, "I am sorry," but the words would not come. Instead, he tried to take her hand, but she pulled away and walked back into the crowd, leaving him behind. Once more, guests began to notice Daniel's struggle. Whispers circling around the room. Investors, who once admired his control, now saw cracks in his armor. Claire, meanwhile, found herself surrounded by people genuinely curious about her, not for her husband's name, but for her own story. She spoke with passion about the charitable projects she had once worked on, the art she loved, the dreams she had buried. Her words lit up her eyes, and people leaned closer. Fascinated, Daniel watched from afar, each laugh, each smile. She gave another man cut him deeper. He felt a jealousy he had never known before. It was not just jealousy of men admiring her beauty, but of the realization that she was shining brighter than him, that she was capable of captivating an entire room without his shadow over her as he stood out there clenching his fists. One of his main investors, Mr. Harrington, approached him with a polite but pointed smile. "Daniel, your wife is extraordinary. Why have you kept her hidden from us all these years? She is the most refreshing presence tonight." Daniel forced a laugh, masking his shame. "Oh, Claire, she just prefers to stay private." Harrington raised an eyebrow. "If you say so, but let me be honest. Her confidence, her grace, it only adds value to your image as CEO. People respect a man who has a strong woman by his side." Daniel's stomach twisted. He nodded mutely as Harrington walked away, praising Claire. To others, Daniel realized he had been wrong. All along, the woman he dismissed as plain was the very treasure everyone else could see, but he was too blind to. Arrogant to notice, he watched her standing under the chandelier, laughing softly, her gown glowing under the light, her red lips curving with life, and he felt like the biggest fool in the room. He remembered the time she had waited up for him, dinners gone cold because he worked late, the nights she massaged his shoulders after endless meetings, the mornings she encouraged him when he doubted himself, all the invisible sacrifices she had made, and in return, he had made her feel like she was not enough. The weight of regret crushed him. He wanted to run to her, to beg her forgiveness, to promise her the world, but every time he took a step forward, she moved further. Way not physically, but emotionally. The distance between them now felt like an ocean. She did not need him anymore. She was soaring on her own, and that terrified him. As the evening stretched on, more people approached. Claire complimenting her, admiring her, asking about her opinions. Every compliment felt like a dagger to Daniel, not because he did not want her praise, but because he realized he had never given her those words himself. He had denied her the recognition she deserved, and now strangers were giving her what he had withheld for years. He tried to pull her aside again. "Claire, please listen to me. You belong with me. You are my wife." Her laugh was soft, bitter. "Belonging with you does not mean shrinking myself to fit into your fragile pride, Daniel. I am tired of belonging to someone who cannot even stand beside me without shame tonight. I belong to myself." He felt his chest tighten, panic rising, because for the first time he feared losing her, not just her presence, but her love, her loyalty, her very soul. She turned away. Joining another group, leaving him stranded alone in the corner of his own triumphless night, he lifted his champagne glass. But the taste was bitter. The room seemed to close, and the laughter once sweet now mocked him. The chandeliers that sparkled now blinded him. He was supposed to be the king of the evening, yet everyone admired the queen he had cast aside. The night stretched on, and the music grew livelier. Couples swayed across the polished floor glasses, clinked as waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne, and laughter echoed under the glittering chandeliers. But for Daniel, the room felt like a battlefield. Every glance at Claire was a reminder of his failure. Every whispered compliment she received was a blow to his pride. He tried to convince himself that it was only one evening, that people would forget, but deep down he knew this night was rewriting the way everyone saw both him and her. Claire did not stand in his shadow anymore. She shone brighter than he ever had, and he could not control it. He watched her standing with a circle of investors discussing a charity project she once volunteered for in her college years. Her words came alive with passion, her hands moving gracefully, her voice filled with conviction. People listened with admiration, and even those who had no interest in charity leaned closer, just to feel the spark she radiated. Daniel felt the ground slipping beneath him as he realized the investors were more engaged with her than with his carefully rehearsed sales pitches. The woman he dismissed as unworthy had done what he could not. She had captured their hearts. Suddenly, the host of the evening announced that it was time to recognize influential couples of the business world, a tradition at the gala, where partners were invited to the stage to celebrate their presence together. Daniel's blood ran cold because he knew everyone would expect him and Claire to walk up hand in hand. But how could he face that when only hours ago he had told her she was not fit to be seen beside him? The host called out their names, Daniel and Claire Hamilton. The room erupted into applause. Daniel forced a smile, trying to mask the dread in his chest. He extended his hand toward Claire, silently begging her to take it. She looked at it for a long moment, her red lips curving into a faint smile, not of joy, but of irony. She finally placed her hand in his, but not with warmth, rather with a queen granting a subject permission. And together, they walked to the stage. Flashes exploded from cameras. Applause filled the hall, but beneath it all, Daniel felt only shame. The host praised their partnership, their contributions to the business world, and invited them to speak. Daniel reached for the microphone, but Claire gently took it before he could, and for the first time in his career, he was not the voice representing them. She was. She looked out at the crowd, her eyes steady, her tone calm. I am honored to be here tonight with all of you, but I must admit something. For years I believed my place was to stand silently behind my husband, to be invisible, to be small, because I thought that was what loyalty looked like. But tonight I realized loyalty should never mean losing yourself. Loyalty should not be about shrinking to fit someone else's pride. It should be about walking side by side with respect and love. The hall fell utterly silent, her words resonating deeper than the chandeliers. Above, Daniel's chest tightened, because every sentence was a blade cutting through the lies he told himself, the lies that justified his cruelty. She continued, tonight, I came not to prove anything to him or to anyone, but to remind myself that I am enough, that every woman in this room is enough, not because of the dress she wears or the jewels on her neck, but because of the fire she carries within her. She smiled softly at the crowd, and the applause thundered. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, moved by her courage. Daniel stood beside her, frozen, forced to clap as well, his face burning with humiliation for once. The applause was not for him, it was for her, and it was the loudest applause of the night. When they stepped off the stage, people rushed to her side, congratulating her, praising her strength, asking for her insights. Daniel was shoved aside, ignored, left standing alone as she basked in the recognition he had denied her for so long. He tried again to reach her. Claire, please, can we talk? She finally turned to him, her eyes no longer soft but sharp like steel. Daniel, you had your chance to talk to me for years, but instead you chose silence and shame. I will not let you decide my worth anymore. He felt desperation clawing at his chest. Claire, please. I was wrong. I was blind. I see you now. I see how incredible you are. I regret everything. Her eyes softened for only a moment, but then she shook her head. Words of regret cannot erase years of neglect. Daniel, actions do, and tonight my action is to choose myself. He felt the floor crumble beneath him. He wanted to scream, to beg, but he knew nothing would change the truth. She had already walked too far from him emotionally. He was no longer her world. He watched as she turned away, joining a group of women who looked at her with admiration, her laughter rising above the music, her beauty undeniable, her presence unforgettable. He stood alone at the edge of the ballroom, drowning in regret. As the night went on, he realized the cruelest truth of all. He had always wanted the approval of strangers, but in chasing that, he had lost the one person whose approval mattered the most. Claire did not need revenge. She did not need him to suffer. She simply needed to live free and radiant. And that was punishment enough, because he would forever remember that he had been given a diamond, and he had thrown it away only to watch it shine brighter without him. As the gala drew to a close and guests departed, still whispering about Claire's stunning comeback, Daniel remained behind, staring at the empty glass in his hand, the echo of her words ringing in his ears. Loyalty should never mean losing yourself. He left the ballroom into the cold night air, his heart heavy, his empire intact, but his soul shattered, because the woman he once believed was not good enough had proven to the entire world and to herself that she was far more than he ever deserved. And as Claire rode home that night with her head held high, the city lights reflected in her eyes, she knew she had finally reclaimed herself, and no man, not even the CEO she once loved, could take that away from her ever again.